What I've been asked here to do today is just talk a little bit sort of on the cost of production side, sort of organic versus conventional, what the cost of production and some of the things that you need to be thinking about. And what I want to first off is like I'm going to be basing this a lot on some of the field crop budgets that I put together annually with the field crop team. We've had organic budgets in there now for about 5 or 6 years, and Hugh Martin, who's going to be speaking after me, he was instrumental in getting those things going. So I want to make sure I share the credit or the blame, depending on your opinion of them, for those budgets with Hugh. So we'll be basing a lot of the numbers that I'm going to be working through on the field crop budgets and doing some comparisons to the conventional. So again, I'm going to be sort of concentrating on those costs that are different in an organic system versus a conventional, or some other things that you're going to need to be thinking about in organic versus conventional. So I'm going to be highlighting some of those, not every single one of the costs, but we'll be walking through some of the differences here. So the first one here is seed costs. Typically in the organic system, the seed prices are a little higher, and the seeding rates are a little higher. So you typically see the seed costs a little higher on the organic. You may be looking at the corn and soybeans. The corn and soybeans, thanks. The corn and soybeans there are higher. Those are GM corn and soybeans, so they would be a little bit higher in price. I know soybeans, for an example, if you planted a non-GM soybean conventional seed, it would be in the $50 range, so it would be a little lower than the organic variety, and then the non-GM corn would be closer to the $80 range, maybe a little less than $80 for corn. So that's why the corn and the soybean prices are a little bit higher on the conventional there than the organic. But again, you're seeing a little bit higher prices on the organic side of things, and it tracks. The seed prices for organic track very much with the seed prices of corn. They, if grain market prices are up, then seed prices are up, and organic seed prices kind of tag along with it. So there's just sort of the increased margin on the seed prices for the organic varieties. Fertilizer, and I should be saying as well, and that was one of the struggles we had when Hugh and I were putting these together, is when we're looking at organic crop budgets versus conventional crop budgets, it's hard to think of it in sort of annual increments, right? Because in organic especially, you're looking at a system, a cropping system that's based on a rotational series of crops that are working towards building that soil health and the right weed control and pest controls. Whereas in the conventional system, it's easier to sort of peg an annual cost in there, and there's things that are happening on the organic side that may be carrying over to other years, and that they're intended to be for other years. So it's harder to say, okay, well this is an annual cost for the corn, and it doesn't imply, or it doesn't reflect what's going to happen in years to come. Where in the organic system, it certainly has that intent. That's the whole intent, is sort of that cropping system. So it's hard. We look here on the corn and wheat. We've got organic fertilizer prices. We have $100 an acre there, and some of these, there's a great variation in some of the costs in these. If you look at if you're a livestock producer and you're going to be applying manure on your organic crops, some people all they charge the crops is the application cost. So you're looking at $25, $30 for the application costs. That would be sort of the least amount that they would charge for the fertilizer. But then they can also look at the components of the manure and start pricing out, similar to what you've got sort of the conventional nitrogen and P and K values. You can then say, okay, well my hog manure or beef manure or poultry manure has X pounds of N and X pounds of P, and then you can cost it out based on sort of current nitrogen costs on that side of things. I know I was talking to Roger just prior to this. There's some other organic fertilizers that are coming on stream as well that are given the ability of increased products, increased availability of different fertilizers that can be used in an organic system. So again, we've got $100 an acre for the manure and compost in corn and wheat, And then I just have the three crops here as an example, but in soybeans we just have the soil maintenance. And again, that soil maintenance is one that impacts across the cropping system. So it's not just a one-time cost. It's really intended to be a system. So you've got the cover crops in place that are controlling the weeds and you know, creating that soil health and the nutrient cycling and all of those good things that are impacting the soil. So it's a little bit more difficult to sort of pin what those costs are, but again, you'd have to sort of work those numbers out. But these are the numbers that we have in the field crop budgets, and just in comparison, you can see what the corn, soybeans, and wheat numbers are. Far easier to calculate what the corn, soybean, and you know, the fertilizer costs are for corn and soybeans when you've got you know X pounds of urea or UAN, and those are far easier to calculate. You're looking really typically at just a 1-year time frame as well, not looking at the cropping system as much. So soil maintenance, again, it's you know, we've got that $50 charge in there on the field crop budgets. Again, there's a big variation in there. Really, you're looking at, you know, doing the cover crops, so tillage and planting costs are included in that, and then, you know, anything that happens post-planting as far as, you know, trying to control that crop to when you're going to plant the next one. How are you going to do that? Are you going to plow it down or till it down, or how are you going to get control of the cover crops when you go into the other one? Or some people use a fallow period. So again, there's a lot of variation in there. So that soil maintenance cost in our field crop budgets is almost a placeholder. Say, make sure you think about this, and it's going to change year over year depending on what cover crops you're looking at, what's the next crop is going to be. So you're looking at you know, different cover crops, different tillage methods depending on the year perhaps. So really it's about, and again, it's that cropping system versus the annual cropping dilemma that we had with the organic budgets. Weed control, and we're going to be talking a fair bit about weed control over the next few speakers here as well. But just again, of course, on the organic side, weed control is more mechanical versus chemical. So I just put up a little comparison here as far as pulling out of what the budgets here that we've got put together. On the corn side of things, we've got you know, we had in the field crop budgets we have a chisel plow and then a couple of cultivations, and that's what we have for tillage. Of course, the weed control in the organic system is largely mechanical. So we've got an extra cultivation in there and then some harrowing in there as well. And again, that can vary as well depending on, you know, if you've got some weed outbreaks or if you're early in your cropping system as far as trying to get, you know, the good soil health and get the good organic system in place. You may be in there a little bit more often on the harrowing to control some of those weeds, and I know that's always a challenge on that side of things. And then I think a couple of years into doing the field crop budgets, we added some hand weeding labor in there as well. From some feedback we had from some growers saying, well, we do have to have some extra hand labor in there to do some additional weeding for some outbreaks and those kind of things. So you see, this is just a corn example, an extra $40 hand weeding labor there. So you see the difference there as far as being able to use the the chemicals in the conventional versus the mechanical. You've got almost a $50 difference there between the two systems there on the weed control side of things. And then as well, you've got those soil maintenance costs as well on the organic side of things, but certainly a different system and a different way of looking at controlling the weeds and different management styles, and certainly you got to be thinking about that when you're getting into it, that there's going to be an increased level of management here as far as trying to get a handle on that organic system and looking at it differently than you would on a conventional system. So with certification, and again, it's typically acreage based fees, and a lot of it is sort of a base fee, and then it increases as you and then as you increase your acreage, you spread that base fee over more acres, and then there's different certifying bodies, so they've got different fee schedules on some of them, but this is just kind of gives you a sense of typical ones that I've seen anyways, and you know, can be as high as $40 an acre on those really small acreages, but as you get into some of the larger acreage, and in the crop budgets we have $3 an acre for that certification fee. It's in that $2 to $4 range for those fees. So certainly when you get into those larger acreage, it becomes a far less of a significant cost on the certification side of things as you increase the acreage and spread that fee across the more acres. But it is something you're going to have to, I mean, if you want to have the organic certification, you're going to have to go through that process and pay for these, and to be able to sell it and market it as organic, you're going to need to include that and have the inspections done and have the certification body in place to do those things. Labor, again, labor is another one that's going to be, it's a different management system under the organic system, so there's going to be more record keeping on, so more office time for as far as making sure you've got all the records, input records, and all the things that you did within that cropping year. There's going to be a little more machine labor, obviously, because you've got more tillage on there, so a little more machine operators, machine labor, and as well increased hand labor, like I was talking about earlier on the corn. We have it's a little bit more so on the soybeans. I think we got $60 an acre hand labor, hand weeding labor for the soybeans, so it was increased labor on that side of things. So you're going to have a little more intensive on the labor side of things, managing some of the organic systems. So something you'll have to think about as far as the labor availability and who will be doing those work. So I know there's a number of people from Agricorp here, so they would be the best ones to approach on the production insurance side of things, but there are organic production insurance plans available, and you'll see in corn, soybeans, and wheat, and spelt as well, there's organic insurance plans, but things like the spring grains and the hay and pasture, you can still use the general production insurance plans, but there's no specific organic plans for those crops as yet. And then in those, in the years that you're transitioning, you've got the 36-month window where you transition period. You can be using the crop insurance plans, the general plans in there, and you're looking at the general insurance, those the basic plans for the crop insurance side of things. You can use those, and then once you get certified organic, then you can move to the organic plans, because there are a different price structure, and I've got the different prices here. Just pulled these off of Agricorp as far as these are the 2013 rates, and this is based on their base premium, 90% coverage. So you can choose different coverage levels from 75 to 90% typically on these crops, but I just wanted to give you a sense of the differences in costs. On the organic plans, they just have the fixed price plans. They don't have a floating one that they do in the corn and the soybeans and wheat for the conventional, but they are a little bit more. So you're seeing, as far as the fixed versus the conventional, about double the cost on the organic plans versus the conventional plans. But of course, that fixed price then is based on the organic fixed price. So organic price. So that's why you're seeing the increased premium costs on those. But you see the differences in the cost there. So and there are some good organic plans available for the risk management side of things. All right, and yields per bushel, just to give you a comparison of the different yield things, and I know I got some of these numbers from Hugh as far as some of the research that was done as far as organic yields versus the conventional yields. You're certainly seeing a lower yields on the organic side of things, and there's work underway to get those organic yields up. But these are some based on some research that Hugh had as far as the current yield. So that's what I'm using in some of the numbers here. But that does mean there's going to be some lower costs on the organic side of things, because there's going to be less drying costs, less storage costs, because you've got less production on those organic acres for the the yields, based on the yields, and less trucking costs, and so that's impacted in the yield in the field crop budgets that you see there as well. So sort of tie it all together here on the cost of production side of things. I mean, I kind of highlighted the different things that the different areas to highlight, and the differences in the main differences in the organic versus conventional. So this is how it kind of plays out on when you look at all of the costs here, besides land and overhead, and I'll talk a little bit about that side of it as well. But I don't have land and overhead included in there because they will be consistent whether you're doing conventional versus organic. So the relative differences will still be the same whether you've got land and overhead included and or not. And one of the things too, I mean, land is one of those costs. If I put land cost in there, it's one of those costs that I could be literally 200 or 300% out. If I put $100 an acre in there, the guys in Chatham-Kent would say, I'll take as many acres as I can at 100 acres. I mean, they're paying $350 an acre for land. So it really, it's really yield dependent, and so that's why we don't have a land value in there. But so this would be cost before land and overhead. But you do see, on the corn, fairly similar costs on the corn side of things on a per acre basis. A little bit higher in the soybeans, and a lot of that was that hand labor side of things, and as well a little bit more of the machine operations for weed control, and then on the wheat a little bit higher as well. So on a per acre basis, I mean, especially in corn, they're fairly even as far as the costs. But again, the big determining factor here is, I mean, you're not selling acres, you're selling bushels of corn and of soybeans. So once you start dividing that out by the bushels to find out sort of what are my margins here, what do I need, what's my minimum I need to get to cover these costs. On the corn side of things, the minimum you need is 360, where in the organic, when you've got 111 bushels, it's 478. So you need, and it's almost double on the soybean side of things, and almost triple on the wheat side of things as far as what you're going to need as far as a market price to cover those minimum costs. And that's not covering land and overhead yet. This is just the margin to cover those operating costs that you have. So again, when you start looking at the yield factors in the organic side of things, this is why those organic premiums are needed, because the yield values or the yield levels, you need to have those higher prices on the soybeans to entice people into it, for one thing, but to just cover the costs as well, because there certainly are, because of the decreased yield or the less yield, and hopefully over time, if yields get closer to conventional yields, that become less of a factor. But certainly now we've got, that's why you're seeing the premium rates that you have. You need to have those premiums in there to be able to cover those costs. So what I did to just one example here to add land and overhead costs, just to give you a sense. Okay, let's have a look at sort of the total cost of production here. I put in $150 an acre for land and overhead, so that's $100, $110 for land and $40, $50 for overhead, just to have some idea of where those numbers would lie if that was in the land rent area of $100, $110 an acre. So $4.58 for corn would be your total cost of production versus $6 for organic, and then certainly jumps up quite a bit when you look at $9.40 for conventional versus $17 for organic, and $5.70 and $13 for organic. So when you add the land and overhead costs, and that's it's based on our field crop budget, so it's so you've got to be thinking about well, there's all these other, you want to be using your own costs. I mean, it's not something that you wouldn't want to go out and base everything on these kind of numbers, but it just kind of gives you a framework of letting you know where those it really depends on the land you're on and what kind of land cost you've got to see where you are. But you certainly see the higher cost of production on the organic side when you look at it from a per bushel basis. So another one that David asked me to touch on here as well is on the transition period, just to see, and I know I did some work in with some dairy grazers, and because dairy grazing, intensive grazing, and pasture management is fairly key on organic dairies. There's a number of organic dairy farmers in the study, and their adage that they kept on telling me is, as far as organic dairy or any organic, in the transition period, things are going to get worse before they get better, is kind of what they told me. And that's kind of what the transition period you see here, as far as, you're working within an organic system, but you're still receiving conventional prices. So that's what I've done, just to give you a sense, and this is assuming in the third year you're harvest organic, so you need to have that, make sure you've got that 36-month window between your conventional inputs and the harvest. So if it does spill over to year 4, then you've got another year of conventional prices versus the organic prices. So it's sort of the main thing I wanted to highlight here. And I'm using 490, and that was and that becomes a very key consideration in here. I mean, I'm looking at 2013 prices you could book today, as far as 2013 prices. So we're at about 490 now, and then organic prices were around $12 for corn. So I've used that in year 1 and year 2. They've got conventional prices, but using the organic system. And you see, this is the margin before land and overhead. So this is what you've got available to pay for land and overhead. So obviously you can see in those transition years, you got to be thinking about cash flow. How am I going to cash flow these things, and what do I need to consider as far as what margins will I have to pay for those transition costs. But then when you get into the year 3 here, even at that 111 yield levels, when you get $12 corn, you got some fairly healthy margins there of 800 versus the conventional here at 490, at 181. So I mean, this is 800 is available to pay for land and overhead versus 181 is available to pay for land and overhead in the conventional system. So you've got to get through those 2 years, 2 to 3 years to get to that point, and you got to kind of work at sort of what are going to be my cash flow considerations on there. And again, I mean, this is all based on, subject to your assumptions, right? I mean, I'm using 490, which is currently what it is now. What's it going to be in year 2? I mean, what's it going to be in harvest of 2013 even? That's what I could book corn for today for 2013 harvest, but what's it going to be closer to the time? I mean, old crop corn now is sitting about 670, 675. So, but we're looking forward, and corn prices. You have to sort of figure out, okay, where do I think corn prices are going to go, and sort of get a sense of where you think the market's going to go, because that's a big factor on those. And on the yield side of things, I mean, I used at 111, and then I assumed in year 1 you're going to have less yield in year 1 because you've got, you're trying to, gain experience in growing organic, plus you're going to have, the year 1 challenges of perhaps more weeds and more pest control. So I discounted the yields in the first couple of years there. So I mean, that just gives you a sense of, in those transition years, you're going to have to think about sort of cash flow wise, how am I going to work that? What do I need as far as cash flow? And where do corn prices need to be if I'm going to use corn in my transition years or not? So just to give you a sense of sort of what those margins. But once you get to that conventional year or the organic years, I mean, you've got some healthy margins there, and that, again, it's dependent on whether you've got those organic markets. I mean, certainly we've got, Yorkshire Valley saying we've got demand for these, and we've got demand. We need to have the organic grains, so that's great to have that market ahead of time to know that at the end of my transition period, there's going to be a market for that grain at organic prices, because you're certainly going to need it, certainly at current corn prices. So. And then I did the same thing for soybeans and wheat, just sort of walk through the same exercise there, and you see again, the negative margins in those transition years, even at that 12.25 levels. But then the margins are getting a little bit better. I mean, in year it's those yield levels that we could get. If as the organic yields get better, you'll have better margins on that side of things. But So you see, I mean, the margins on the soybeans isn't as great the advantage over conventional soybeans, but certainly there's an increased margin there. But again, if soybeans is part of that transition period, you want to be looking at what are going to be my cash flow requirements, and it's even more so of a consideration if you're going to have wheat in that transition year at the current prices. Again, I mean, it's all subject to our assumptions, so I would really recommend everybody to be cash flowing these things out and doing your own numbers and finding out what kind of reasonable yields and what your expectations are for price on these things, because especially in those transition years, you want to be looking at what's going to be what's coming down. So and this is just another example here on the barley, very similar to the corn and soybeans as far as the gross dollar amounts there of 68 to 37. So and then not as big of a margin, but I mean there's other factors in there on the rotation side of things, of including things like other small grains on the agronomic side of things. But I just wanted to give you an idea there of types of crops that may be used in the transition period and what those transition period things may look like. So. And I did bring along, and they're out on the table there, the 2013 field crop budgets are there. We do have a fact sheet as well on cost of production budgeting. I just finished up the 2012 custom rates, and then they're available. And these are all available online as well at our website as well. But the 2012 custom rates are just recently released and summarized, so they're available on the table there as well as online. So you can have a look at the latest custom rates. The last one before that was the 2009 rates. We do have some budgeting resources online that can help you. The organic budgets are on there that are in Excel format, that you can take those and plug your own numbers in and work out your own cost scenarios. And if there's budgets that aren't, if you're looking at different crops that are not available on the Ontario site, there's certainly Farm Management Canada has a farm budget database of budgets across Canada that are available that may give you a template to work at as far as costing out some numbers. And then there's a number of different calculators that may be of interest as well, that the manure nutrients calculator and the Ontario crop residue value estimator. I mean, certainly within the organic system, that's a key thing. So you may want to have a look at gocorn.net. Those calculators are available there. And then I found this one here from Iowa State, which is kind of it's kind of an interesting spreadsheet that actually works through, like you put out your however many different crops you want, you do the individual budgets for those, but then you can work out your transition period, and it works out, I think, up to 5 years is what, and you can say how many acres of each one of those crops you're going to be putting in, and how much is the transition period, and you can kind of work out sort of what those average returns are over that transition period. So it's kind of an interesting calculator that can kind of work you through that transition period and help you sort of make some decisions on how I'm going to transition and how much do I take on at a time, and how is it going to look from an economic standpoint through that transition period. So yeah, you can Iowa State. I mean. You can just Google, the organic transition calculator from Ohio State, and I'm sure you'll find it on there as well. But that's available, and that was kind of an interesting calculator that I found. So that's all I had. I don't know if there's any questions on